What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. In this episode we're going to start lifting the Forester. So what's up everyone? Time to get to work. I really plan on at least going on a couple trips before the winter comes, so I've really got to jump on this thing and get it going. I'm gonna have to think about those rear lateral arm or control arm bolts. They may fight me a little bit to get out of there. I'm not quite sure if I'm gonna have to start cutting or whatnot. But first I want to show you the tires on this thing. It's the rear tires that are in the worst shape, and you can see how much cracking is right on the edge of that tread. But even, you can see down here, the sidewalls are really starting to crack on them. Now coming home on the highway one night, I heard this pop so loud on this corner that I thought it was a stone being fired out of the tire. But, you know, the tires don't really have a lot of tread to hold on to stones. And it was a puncture that I took. I didn't realize till the next morning. I went to go leave for work and kind of drove on this tire a little bit. You can see that tire is severely damaged. So I managed to put a plug in it that morning, and it slowed down the leak like almost to a stop. Well, I thought it actually fixed the leak, but obviously it's still leaking, or there's leaks from somewhere else. But this tire is in dangerous condition. And that's the point where, your sidewall can fail, the tread can start coming off. Just, gaining a lot of heat on the highway, anything can happen. So I'll jack it up, start yanking off as many parts as I can. I'll start in the front and work my way to the rear, and hopefully everything goes straight forward. I am deleting the sway bars. I've got to drop the U-frame off because I'm probably going to try and clean it up and maybe spray it. There's a lot of work to get done, but first things first is get the parts off of it. So this should really give everyone a good idea of what I'm up against here. You can see the amount of rust and crust holding this thing together. I did spray down these bolts with some penetrating fluid, but the outer boot is it's torn wide open, and it's flinged grease all inside the rim. I didn't realize it was torn that bad. And the inner boot is actually torn and leaking as well. You can't really see it from here, but so yeah, suspension is obviously like really bad shape. But this thing is 20 years old, and I've been parking on grass, which you really shouldn't be doing. You can see how much rust buildup is on that U-frame. Considering most of this is going to get replaced, the steering knuckles, I may try and do the same type of thing I did with the Impreza's knuckles, just using trying to get as much off of them as I can, and then using the rust converter on them. Now the rear is a very similar story, and just looking at this sort of stuff, the subframe is not rotted through. This is all surface stuff. It's quite thick for surface stuff, but it is definitely solid. I kind of cranked it with a hammer over on this side just to kind of feel how solid it was. Those long bolts, that's the reason that I just don't want to deal with them. I just want to yank everything off and replace it all. So progress has been slow, but I wanted to grab the camera and just kind of show a couple things. I guess, it's been a while since I was actually looking at these parts online. I was thinking this thing was a U-frame in the front, but it's actually these two rails, and they're so rotten that there's no way I'm putting them back on. And I'm thinking I may not put anything back on. The Impreza, I took the U-frame off that. Honestly, I can't even tell it's missing. And I know these would probably safeguard the bottom side of the Forester a little bit, but looking at it still, I just can't see how something's going to get hung up past this. But I'll probably regret it later. This is how much rust actually came into the bottom of them. So the insides are just as rotten, and I can kind of tell in some places how thin they've actually gotten. And with those rails out of the way, things clean up a little bit down here actually. They were pretty much the rustiest thing. I mean, connecting to these points of the engine cradle, that's pretty much the rustiest points that are left on both sides. But I decided, I saw some rust over on that control arm, and I ended up taking my little hammer and I just punched the hole right through that control arm, just with this little hammer, swinging it like this. And you can see this side is a lot stronger, but it does actually dent quite easily with this little hammer. These things rot right through, and that is the old recall. I mean, it's quite old. These things are very old now, right? And these control arms are, that one's 20 years old, so I'm imagining it held on for that long, but they rot right through and basically break right off, and the wheel goes back into the fender and causes a bunch of damage. And the vehicle's got a little body rot up in here. This corner actually was in an accident at one point in the thing's life. The previous owner actually explained it to me. And obviously, you know, I'm probably going to want to try and clean some of it up anyway, and give it some undercoating if it'll actually stick. So it's the following morning, and I didn't make as much progress as I thought I was going to. I had to go completely medieval on this fucking thing, and it made me make some new choices last night. I ordered some more parts, so let's kind of go over that right now. So I pretty much only got this left front corner apart. The front and rear sway bar are not going to be used on this application, so I cut them out. I just cut the center of it, cut the end links, and the brackets holding the bushings actually unbolted with some back and forth banging with the impact. The lower control arm, obviously a mess. I did make a cut through here, and I'll show you why in a second, but I just left the ball joint connected for now. I'm gonna have to still get that apart. The strut was another thing I had to fight with. Let me show you all the hardware. So using heat and penetrating fluid and just every technique that I have, I got everything unbolted, but it was a lot of work. That camber bolt for the top of the strut, or that goes in the top hole of the strut, it was so seized. I bet you it took me about half an hour just to get that one bolt. The other bolt was extremely seized, but more so on the nut end, and I ended up taking my grinder and putting a cut down the nut into the bolt just to get a little extra heat on the end of it and break up the threads a little bit, and then finally it impacted off of there. But the bolt wasn't as seized, and I was able to actually get it out. The control arm bolt, because it sits like this and the nut actually faces more of the control arm end, but you can see up in here, this piece of metal, the nut sits in behind it here, and with the control arm kind of coming out this way, it's very difficult to come onto it straight. So I decided to unbolt the control arm at the other end and then come back to this end and then just cut through that rotted piece of the control arm so I could get it off out of the way, come straight onto the nut. And even then, it was still really tight, and I slipped on that nut quite a few times before I actually got the bolt off, but it ruined the end of the bolt. So I'm going to need quite a bit of new hardware for one. For two, there's no way that someone's going to want to bother adjusting these outer tie rods to the inners, and I only bought outers just thinking, well, I probably wouldn't need that much of alignment. Heat this with the torch and it'll start to move, but I'm not going to mess with it, and I'm not going to ask somebody else to. So I ordered new inners and some new boots. Even though the boots are probably okay shape, I decided, well, I'll just get some new ones anyway. They're 12 bucks a piece. Going through all of this, I made another big decision. Because the rear suspension is so much more rotten than the front, and I have all of the components to bolt to the subframe, I just made the decision last night. It broke down and ordered a new subframe. You know, it's an expense that I didn't really want to have to go through, but I figured if I'm going through all this other work, I just might as well get it done. So, I mean, it's going to take some time to get here, but I have a lot of work to do, obviously. The rear subframe coming out of it. is going to take me some time. I'm probably going to have to start cutting a lot of stuff back there. It is a couple hours later. I have the right front corner all apart. Came apart pretty much the same way as the left front. I ended up cutting that control arm just to make sure I could get that one bolt out. The strut bolts definitely gave me a fight, and I used all the weapons that I had been using on the other side to get this side apart. I also got the tie rods out of there. Inners and outers are off, and I managed to keep them assembled, so I got some kind of basic measurement to set up the new ones when they come. So I'm ready to move on to the rear. I'm going to be cutting a lot of stuff in the rear to get it apart, but I'm going to start with the brakes and drain the diff and then go from there. I've got the brakes apart on both sides. I've spent, I don't know, probably an hour and a half on the other side trying to get those strut bolts out. I finally did, and I figured, well, I'll come over to this side and start tackling it. And I've been here for like an hour and a half, and I'm finally getting this bottom one loose. I used everything: penetrating fluid, heat, my huge impact. That thing just, the top one fought me for maybe 20 minutes, but this bottom one, I mean, you can hear the compressor still building. I've just been fighting and fighting and fighting with it, and finally got it to break free. So I think that's it for today. I just don't feel like working on this thing anymore, and it's getting close to dinner, so I will just plan on trying to tackle some more tomorrow. At least I can start dropping the struts out and cutting the arms all off in the morning. The rest of it should come apart relatively easy, I guess. I don't know. So I am out here again this morning, and I've made some pretty good progress. Spent a few hours again, but I have the knuckles off. I went ahead and cut the control arms on the inner side and just kind of left those ends on the subframe and the other ends on the knuckles. The trailing arms are off. It took me quite a bit to get this parking brake cable out of the backing plate, but I managed. I ended up finding this wheel cylinder is seeping, so I'm going to have to get one of those, and I'm going to get some new parking brake hardware. And the same thing pretty much over on this side. I had to leave the bracket for the rear sway bar. The hardware is just too rotted, and even to try and cut this out of here without taking everything else apart is just going to be too difficult. But you can see how clean the inside of this is. It's just all dirt and dust. And further up, that's still just surface rust where the strut will mount. And even having a look at that filler pipe, I mean, it's got rust on it, but it's not like really rotted, so it's something I can hold off for now. And the fuel tank's actually not in too bad a shape either. So as all of this stuff comes off the vehicle, it's looking a lot cleaner, I should say. It's this rear subframe that's left. But I've got a feeling I'm going to have to do something with the exhaust, at least lower it a little bit. I know it's got a leak up front, some like on that bracket that I've welded on before. And this exhaust, I actually forgot, it's actually off a 99 Legacy. It was a Bosel exhaust, and it was a brand new exhaust, so I peeled it off and bolted it on this thing. Well, over the years it's taken quite a bit of rot, and if I start trying to mess with it too much, then I'm gonna just create leaks that aren't there yet. So I'm gonna have to probably lower the exhaust down before I start dealing with the rest of this, but I'm gonna take a break and see what I come up with. And now it's all just a rusted pile of scrap metal that needs to be tossed. Something I did notice, this right rear strut, the mount started to actually fail, which was a common thing on really old cars, like that were beat on heavily. I remember my first Impreza started to have this problem. These rear trailing arms, I actually need to get these brackets off, so I'll have to heat up that bolt and get it out at some point. I looked for them online, but I couldn't find any, and they're probably more of a dealer item. So this type of trashy bracket here, I'll end up just cutting that off like I did on this side already. and then clean them up as best I can and coat them as best as I can, put them back in. So I'm at the point where the rear cross member is ready to come out. I ended up peeling out the exhaust. It's going to need a flange repair at the rear of the cat there in order to make it last a few more months until the engine gets pulled and I do something with the exhaust. These rear nuts on the studs that hold the differential to the cross member never generally give a problem, but they always seem to pull out the studs just because the ends rust on them so badly. And as long as they don't round them off, they seem to always come out. And even the bolts holding the rear cross member in are not too bad a shape. I'm probably going to be able to clean those up and reuse them, no problem. But that's really the next step, is to loosen those off and start lowering all this down onto the jack stand, and then hopefully kind of tip the cross member over top of the differential and down out that side. And here is the rear subframe down out of the Forester. I've made the right decision in ordering one, that's for sure. Not only going to save a lot of time by not having to remove these control arms, but just the amount of rust on this thing is, I mean, a lot of it is surface stuff, but still, it's just to the point where there's, you know, it's only going to spread rust onto everything else. So coming down out of there was the best option. Now all of this work really spanned over the last few days, so I already have a couple days of shipping time for the subframe to come to me. It's got to come up from the US, so it's going to be a while. Same thing with like the inner tie rods and boots, the wheel cylinders for the rear brakes. Just a couple of extra little items that I need to get. I need to run out and try and get some hardware for some of the hardware I'm going to have to replace. And then the steering knuckles, I have to spend quite a bit of time on those because they're heavily corroded, almost as corroded as the subframe. But I've already gone over my budget, and I really have to budget the rest of this thing because I've spent more than I thought I was going to. I know this video dragged on a little bit, but it was a full, complete video, and if you liked it, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.